Look, you realize you're a lowlife who's not gonna make it in this company.
Malik sat at his desk, the polished surface of the mahogany wood gleaming beneath the dim office lights. The excitement of his graduation, the months of preparation, the countless sleepless nights, all of it had led to this moment. The prestigious financial firm he had landed a position at was everything he had dreamed of. Or it was supposed to be. His mind wandered back to the interview, where he had fought to keep his composure despite the palpable tension. As a young black man stepping into the world of high finance, he knew the weight of every expectation placed on his shoulders. He was determined to succeed. No, he would succeed. But the real challenge was just beginning. Malik had barely made it through the door of the high-rise before he realized the scale of the battle ahead. The snide remarks, the sideways glances, the whispered conversations when he entered a room. It was all there, subtle but unmistakable. He had expected it. It didn't make it any easier. Then there was Benedict. Benedict Ashford, his new supervisor, was a man of polished suits and a sharp, unyielding demeanor. From the moment Malik stepped into his first meeting, Benedict made it clear that he didn't believe a man like Malik belonged in the room. "Mr. Montgomery," Benedict had said, scanning Malik's resume, his tone laced with condescension, "I see you've done well at university, but university doesn't prepare you for the real world. Let's see if you can handle what's ahead. The financial world is not as forgiving as academia." The words stung, but Malik had kept his face neutral, nodding politely as he reminded himself, "I'm here because I earned it." The first project came quickly, a high-profile investment proposal that could make or break the company's next quarter. Malik had worked tirelessly, putting in the extra hours to prove he could handle the pressure. Yet Benedict seemed determined to test him at every turn. "Are you sure this is the direction we want to take?" "This might not be your best option, Mr. Montgomery," Benedict remarked during a strategy meeting, his eyes scanning Malik's work with thinly veiled doubt. Malik clenched his jaw but held his ground. He had put together a solid plan, one that could bring in substantial returns for the firm. Still, he could feel the skepticism emanating from Benedict and the room. A few glances exchanged among his colleagues didn't escape Malik's notice either. He wasn't blind to the silent messages being passed around. Can he really do this? It wasn't just Benedict's doubt that burned in his chest. It was the subtle but unmistakable racial undercurrent that hung in the air like a thick fog. Malik had known from the beginning that being a black man in a predominantly white industry meant he would always have to prove himself more than his peers. But now, with his supervisor openly questioning his every move, the weight of those expectations seemed almost unbearable. Malik pushed the thought aside and focused on the work in front of him. The only thing he could control was his performance. And he would perform for his family, for the community that believed in him, and most importantly, for himself. As the meeting concluded, Malik stood, feeling the weight of his boss's dismissive glance. He took a deep breath and walked out of the conference room, his mind already calculating his next move. If Benedict wanted to doubt him, fine, let him. Malik would prove him wrong, he had to. This was only the beginning. And in the shadows of his ambition, Malik would rise. 2 months passed, and Malik's resolve only grew stronger. Every day he arrived early, stayed late, and poured his energy into the large investment project that was supposed to showcase his abilities. The project was ambitious, the stakes high, and Malik was determined to prove to everyone that he belonged in the room, regardless of his race. But as his efforts began to bear fruit, a new challenge emerged, the whispers and subtle sabotage from his colleagues. It started with small things, sideways comments, the occasional raised eyebrow when he made a suggestion in a meeting. But over time, it escalated. Jonathan Daniels, a colleague Malik had considered somewhat friendly when he first started, became a constant source of pressure. Jonathan was a senior analyst, older, with a reputation for being a company man. He didn't hide his disdain for Malik's presence on the team. At first, it was the little things, scoffing at his ideas, offering backhanded compliments, and undermining his contributions at every turn. "You sure that's the best strategy, Malik?" Jonathan asked one day, after Malik had just presented a new investment opportunity to the group. It seems a little risky, not exactly what I would have proposed. Malik's eyes narrowed. He'd worked tirelessly on this strategy, and it was clear that it had the potential to generate significant returns for the firm. But Jonathan's voice, laced with skepticism, seemed to echo louder than the praise he'd received earlier. He ignored the jab, but it kept happening. At every meeting, every project review, Jonathan would find some way to chip away at Malik's confidence. And it wasn't just Jonathan. Other colleagues, too, began to question his judgment and expertise. Some did it subtly, with a veiled tone of concern. "I just don't think you're ready for this, Malik. You might want to reconsider. This is a big responsibility," said Emily, a colleague who had never seemed particularly interested in his work until now. Her words stung, and Malik could see the judgment in her eyes, the silent doubt. He didn't need to be told that he wasn't ready. He knew what they were really saying. "You're not supposed to be here." Malik felt the weight of their eyes on him, the pressure growing heavier with each passing day. But what hurt the most was the realization that their criticism wasn't about the work. It was about him. There was something more insidious behind it. He was no longer just a young man trying to prove himself. He was the black man in a room full of people who, despite their professional facades, made it clear through their actions and words that they didn't believe someone like him belonged in the prestigious circles of high finance. Still, he pushed on, trying to focus on his work, refusing to give in to their doubts. When he finally completed his proposal for the strategic investments, he presented it in front of the leadership team. The room fell silent as Malik outlined his approach. The numbers spoke for themselves, the strategy was solid, but even as his colleagues sat there, listening, Malik could feel the resistance in the air. Then Benedict spoke, his voice cool and clipped. "Interesting, Mr. Montgomery. But do you really think this is the best move for the firm? I'm not sure I agree. Perhaps you should revise your approach. These projections seem a little too optimistic." Malik clenched his fists, but he kept his voice steady. He couldn't let them see how much it hurt. This wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about doing his job well, about proving to himself that he was more than just a label, more than just the color of his skin. "I believe in my projections," Malik replied, his voice calm. "I've done the research, and the data supports my approach. I'm confident this will yield positive results for the firm." Benedict didn't respond immediately. He just nodded slowly, though the doubt in his eyes didn't fade. It wasn't the first time Benedict had publicly undermined him, and Malik was starting to wonder if it ever would be. As the meeting ended, Malik felt exhausted. The internal battle raged on. Was this racism, or just his colleagues being overly critical of his work? Was he being treated this way because of his race, or was it just part of the ruthless corporate world? He couldn't always tell. But one thing was certain, this wasn't just about his performance anymore. This was a fight for respect, a fight for recognition in a space that didn't always want to see him as worthy. He left the room, his shoulders heavy, but his determination hardening. He wasn't going to let them break him. He had worked too hard to let them win. The months had passed in a blur, each day a mixture of proving himself, navigating office politics, and wrestling with the growing sense that his colleagues, his superiors, would never truly see him as an equal. The project Malik was working on was complex and demanding, but he had poured everything into it. And despite the whispers and criticisms, it was starting to show results. But even as the numbers came in and his strategies began to bear fruit, the roadblocks remained. Jonathan still found ways to undermine him, Benedict still doubted his every decision, and Emilia, Malik's mentor, was one of the few who could see the raw potential beneath the layers of doubt and resistance. Emilia had been there from the start, a seasoned partner at the firm who had recognized Malik's dedication when no one else had. She saw through the false smiles, the thinly veiled prejudices, and the corporate games, but even her support wasn't enough to shield him from the escalating tension. "You're doing well, Malik, but I can see it. There's more pressure on you than anyone else in this office," Emilia said one evening after a particularly grueling meeting. "Benedict's got his eyes on you. Jonathan's pushing every button he can. They're trying to break you, but I know you've got what it takes. Keep your head up." Malik nodded, grateful for Emilia's steady presence in the chaos. but the weight of the constant battle was starting to feel unbearable. His confidence had been tested to its limits, but now, for the first time, he was beginning to feel something else. Doubt. Was Emilia right? Could he really overcome all of this? Then came the phone call that would change everything. "Malik," Emilia's voice came through the line, urgent but calm. "There's a major contract opportunity coming up. It's big. Bigger than anything you've worked on. And I want you to lead it." Malik's heart raced. This was the moment he had been waiting for, an opportunity to prove not just his worth to the firm, but his worth to himself. The contract was a potential game changer for the firm, and Emilia had enough faith in him to trust him with it. But the excitement was short-lived. The very next day, as Malik sat in a meeting outlining his initial plan, Benedict made his presence felt. "I'm not sure this is a wise move, Mr. Montgomery," Benedict said, his tone sharp as he reviewed Malik's proposal. "You might want to take a step back and reassess. I'm not convinced you're ready for this." Malik swallowed his frustration. He could feel the familiar sting of being undermined, the suspicion that Benedict didn't think he could handle such a high-profile project. But this time, Malik was ready for it. He had been preparing for this moment. He had worked too hard and sacrificed too much to let it slip away now. Jonathan jumped in, as expected. "Maybe it's too early for him to handle something of this magnitude," he added, smirking. The words, though calculated, didn't land the way they used to. Malik's mind raced as he listened to the barrage of criticisms. But there was no time for self-doubt. Not anymore. This was his moment, and he wasn't going to let anyone, not even Benedict or Jonathan, take it from him. "I understand your concerns," Malik said, his voice steady but firm. "But I'm confident in my ability to handle this. I've worked hard, and I've earned this opportunity." For the first time, he saw a flicker of something in Benedict's eyes, something like hesitation, maybe even respect. But it was fleeting. Benedict wasn't one to admit mistakes, and Malik knew that. The next few weeks felt like a blur. Malik buried himself in the details of the contract, putting in countless hours and even sacrificing time with his family to get every detail right. His team was divided. Some were on his side, supporting his vision. Others, led by Jonathan, remained skeptical, questioning every decision, poking holes in his work at every turn. Despite the mounting pressure, Malik found himself more motivated than ever. With Emilia's support, he pressed on, refusing to let the obstacles derail him. There were moments of exhaustion, moments when he wanted to give up and let the weight of the world crush him. But there was something deep inside him, something that refused to be broken. One evening, after an especially grueling day, Malik sat alone in his office, staring at the numbers on his screen. He had been going over the projections for hours, but something wasn't right. His gut told him that there was a better way, a smarter approach. The answer came to him in an instant, a clarity that cut through the fog of doubt. He rewrote the plan. It was risky. It was bold. But it was right. The next day, he presented it to the team. This time, Malik didn't wait for the criticism to come. He addressed it head-on, outlining every step with confidence. "This is my final proposal," he said, his voice unwavering. "And I believe this approach will not only exceed expectations, but will set the firm on a path to unprecedented success." Benedict, Jonathan, and the rest of the team sat in silence, absorbing the change in Malik, the calm determination in his eyes, the certainty in his words. For the first time, Malik wasn't just presenting a strategy, he was presenting himself. It was a gamble. But Malik knew that if he didn't take this chance, he would never truly know what he was capable of. 4. The final stretch of the project had come, and Malik could feel the weight of everything he had fought for. The late nights, the countless doubts, the sacrifices. The contract he had worked so tirelessly on was almost ready to be finalized. But Malik knew that the real test was not in the numbers or the data anymore. It was in the way his colleagues would react to his success. Benedict, Jonathan, and even some of the others in the office had never fully believed in him. The road had been long, filled with obstacles placed intentionally or otherwise in his path. But now, Malik had crossed the finish line, and he could see the fruits of his labor, the hard-earned recognition, that had been just out of reach for so long. As he stood in the conference room, preparing to present the completed contract to the leadership team, his heart beat with a mixture of anticipation and determination. He wasn't going to let anything shake him now. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. The meeting started, and once again, Benedict was front and center, the skeptical expression Malik had grown so accustomed to written across his face. "Mr. Montgomery," Benedict began, his voice cool but not without a hint of uncertainty. "This contract is impressive, I'll give you that. But I'm still not sure that it's the right move for the firm. I think there are a few details you might have missed." Malik fought to keep his composure. He could feel the sting of those words, but he had worked too hard to let them affect him. Instead, he calmly began to walk the room through his approach, showcasing every detail with precision. "This contract, Mr. Ashford, is designed to elevate the firm's position in ways we've never imagined. I've taken every precaution to ensure its success," Malik responded, his tone steady, unwavering. The room fell silent as Malik outlined the results. Each graph, each statistic, each strategic decision he had made was presented with a level of clarity and confidence that even Benedict couldn't ignore. For the first time, Benedict's skeptical expression faltered. The leadership team exchanged looks, impressed by the thoroughness and boldness of the proposal. As Malik finished, a sense of finality settled over the room. It was done. The project was a success. After a long pause, the CEO of the firm, Laura Carrington, spoke. "Malik," she said, her voice firm but kind, "your work on this project has exceeded expectations. Not only have you completed the contract, but you've also elevated the standards for the entire team. I want to commend you for your dedication, your professionalism, and your results." Malik's heart raced as the recognition he had fought so long for finally began to sink in. It wasn't just the numbers that mattered anymore. It was the respect he had earned. But there was more. Benedict, who had always been the skeptic, stood up slowly, his expression unreadable. He took a deep breath before addressing the room. "Malik," he began, though the words seemed to come with some resistance. "I may not have always agreed with your methods, but there's no denying the results. You've proven yourself more than capable. This is impressive." Malik felt a rush of triumph, but he didn't let it show. He simply nodded, maintaining his composure. He had nothing to prove to Benedict anymore. Then came Jonathan. Jonathan had been waiting for this moment, the moment when Malik's success would falter, when the doubt he had sowed would bear fruit. He stood up with a sharp smirk. "Well, Malik," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "I have to admit, I didn't think you had it in you, but I guess you really showed us all. You've proven me wrong." Malik's eyes met Jonathan's, and for the first time, he felt no anger. He didn't need to fight back with words or aggression. He simply smiled, not with superiority, but with a quiet confidence. "I didn't do this to prove you wrong, Jonathan," Malik said calmly. "I did it because I believe in myself, and that's all that matters." The room was silent for a moment, the tension hanging in the air, and then, as if on cue, the applause started. It was subtle at first, just a few scattered claps, but as Malik stood there, the recognition grew louder, more genuine. The applause was not just for the contract, it was for him, for the man who had defied the odds, who had proven that no matter how many obstacles life placed in his path, he could overcome them. He had faced discrimination, doubts, and setbacks, but in the end, he had triumphed. As the applause died down, the CEO turned to Malik with a smile. "We're offering you a promotion, Malik," she said. "Your leadership and performance have earned you a place in a more senior role. We believe in you." Malik nodded, his heart swelling with pride. But as he walked out of the conference room, his mind wasn't on the promotion or the accolades. It was on the journey, the hard-fought battle that had brought him here. For a moment, he thought back to the first day, when Benedict had questioned his ability to succeed. He had been determined then, but now he understood the full weight of his success. He had done this for himself. He had proven that he was more than just the color of his skin. He was a force to be reckoned with. As he walked through the office, there was a new energy in his step. He was no longer the man who had been doubted. He was Malik Montgomery, the man who had turned his dreams into reality, the man who had shown that no one could define him except himself. And in that moment, as he passed by the desks of his colleagues, he saw something that would stay with him forever: respect. It wasn't given freely, but it had been earned. Malik had conquered the shadows, and now the light shone bright.